Are we going into a recession? And if so, did the no-buy trend that went viral at the beginning of the year predict that recession? I have my own thoughts on this topic, but I'd love to hear what you think. So please be sure and drop me a comment down below and let me know your hot take on this as we dive into this week's episode of the Low-Buy Diaries. And I think it will be really interesting for us to revisit this question in a few months and see if our predictions were correct. Hi there, friend, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marissa, and this is A to Zen Life, where I share all of the best tips and ideas to help you simplify your way to a happier, richer, and better life. So if any of those topics sound like your jam, be sure and give this video a like and subscribe to my channel with all notifications turned on so that you don't miss any of the helpful videos that I share here each week. And since we just wrapped, I think I just spit there.
And since we just wrapped.
Oh Lord, I can't believe I just did that on video. It's giving Gollum. And since we just wrapped up April, that means we made it through the 4th month of the low buy challenge that I started at the beginning of this year. And let me tell you, April was the month that I felt super validated about my choice to do a low buy year, because what started as whispers of a possible recession back in March have snowballed into a whole lot more. And as it just so happens, the very first no-buy that I did was way back in 2008 when I graduated in the middle of the Great Recession, which at the time was obviously really very stressful and forced me into survival mode in a big way. But because of the steps that I took to recession-proof my life as a young woman back then, over time, all of those things I did to reduce my expenses, save more money, and boost my income helped me go from surviving to thriving. And because of that, I feel like I'm in a unique position to share tips and ideas on how to prep for a recession. And especially because I remember what it felt like back then and all of the fear and the anxiety and the loneliness of not knowing what to do and not having anyone to turn to for advice or support. Because of that, I want you to know that you are not alone, and I want to be that person for you. And I also want you to know there is always hope and a light at the end of the tunnel, no matter who you are or what your life looks like right now. So with that being said, let's dive into episode 4 of the Low-Buy Diaries. And just in case you missed the previous videos, I will be sure to link them down in the description box below for you in case you want to check those out and get caught up. And in case you want to jump around, here are the timestamps for all of the topics that I'm going to touch on in this week's video. First, we're going to touch on the possibility of us entering a recession and whether or not the no-buy trend that went viral at the beginning of the year actually predicted that recession. Then, as always, I want to share a few things that I did this past month to reduce expenses and/or save money. Next up, I'll be touching on how much I saved in April by not giving in to impulse spending. And then after that, I'll also share the categories we spent the most in this month, as well as exact numbers for how much we spent. And then finally, I want to wrap things up by going back to the no-buy list I made at the beginning of the year and revisiting how well I've been sticking to the rules and exceptions that I set, as well as sharing some easy tips and mindset shifts to help you get super intentional on the purchases that you want to make. Okay, so first things first. Before we dive into the possibility of a recession and whether or not the viral no-buy trend predicted that recession, I think first it would be helpful for us to define what a recession actually is. So according to dictionary.com, a recession is defined as a period of temporary economic decline during which trade and industrial activity are reduced, generally identified by a fall in GDP or gross domestic product in 2 successive quarters. But I would like to add that it can also be characterized by other indicators, such as drops in income and consumer spending, as well as an increase in layoffs and job losses. So with that being said, the reason that no one can definitively say whether or not we're in a recession right now is because recessions can only be declared retrospectively. When the National Bureau of Economic Research, or NBER, looks back over the economic data and various factors over a period of several months, after which point they'll then announce whether or not the country is in an official recession. So for example, even though the COVID-19 recession of 2020 officially started on February 20th of 2020, the recession had already ended in April by the time it was formally announced by the NBER on June 8th of 2020, making it the shortest recession in US history, while the Great Recession that I lived through and mentioned earlier was the deepest downturn since the Great Depression era of the late 30s. However, going back to what I said earlier, one of the best indicators of a recession is often consumer spending and behavior. And there's actually some really interesting data and statistics about popular things that people stop spending money on going into a recession. And I'm planning to share an entire video on this topic next week. So be sure that you're subscribed with all notifications turned on so you don't miss out on that, because I think you'll find it really shocking and illuminating. I know I did. However, one thing that I haven't heard being mentioned as a potential economic indicator of a recession are low-buy and no-buy challenges. But as someone who's been talking about frugal living and minimalism on YouTube for over 5 years now, I've definitely noticed an uptick in the number of videos talking about no-buys and low-buys this year compared to previous years. And outside of no-buys and low-buys, I've also noticed that a lot of this year's most popular trends on social media have been kind of shifting towards reducing consumption and saving money. For example, you've got Project Pan and the underconsumption core trend that have been encouraging people to consume less, use what they have, and prioritize quality over quantity and sustainability, as well as a growing trend called Recession core that apparently has already amassed a whopping 18.7 million posts on TikTok. So knowing what we know about recessions, I think all of these trends and the growing buzz could very well be one of the first warning signs that a recession might be on the horizon. But in a situation like this, it's important to remember not to panic while also doing what you need to do to prepare. And the good news is that the same frugal habits that helped people through the Great Depression, the downturn of 2008, and other tough times still work to this day, and that the principles of simple living, minimalism, and frugality are a powerful strategy to help you spend less and save more to weather the storm. Not only do they give you breathing room, but they also give you options, and they put you back in control even when it feels like the world is spiraling out of control. So now that we've gone over that topic, let's dive into some of the things that I've personally been doing to spend less and save more. So those of you who tuned into last month's episode of the Low-Buy Diaries know that last month was the month that I canceled our Netflix subscription after being a member for, I think, over a decade. Not only was it because I felt like we weren't getting enough value out of that subscription, but it was also because of the principle that they increased the price without informing me that they increased the price, and that really peed me off. So I canceled that subscription last month. So this month was the first month that we saved money not paying that subscription. So what I did instead, so that we could continue watching movies, because that's something that we enjoy as a family, is I got a $40-ish DVD player, and we've been renting DVDs from the library. And so far we've watched Big Hero 6, we are in the middle of watching The Hobbit, and we also watched Encanto. And then we also currently have Willy Wonka, the old version, taken out, as well as James and the Giant Peach, which is peak 90s nostalgia, and I'm super excited to share with my kids. So within 2 months, that DVD player will basically pay for itself and save subscription fees, and we can continue to get free movies to enjoy at the library. So I would definitely advise you to go through and do an audit of your subscriptions and see which ones you haven't been using, which ones you feel like aren't giving you as much bang for your buck anymore, and get those cut out. And cutting subscriptions out is great because that's going to keep saving you money every month. Another thing I really focused on to help us save more money this month is I was really working hard to reduce our grocery expenses. And how I accomplished this was, first of all, with aggressive meal planning, using the meal planning template that I have in my 50-page minimalist budget binder, and then shopping our pantry and using up the things that we already had on stock, while also shopping what's on sale at the grocery store. So I was making things like baked oatmeal with some raspberries that I got on clearance sale. And then I also used some barley that was given to us for free to make a breakfast barley one morning with some fresh apples and some cinnamon. And that was really, really good. And I'm also continuing to add to my repertoire of simple and affordable meals with budget-friendly recipes that I find online and in library books. So speaking of which, some books that I've been enjoying this month are these Betty Crocker vintage found recipes. There's some really good recipes in here, great for the budget, don't cost much, and they give you a little dose of nostalgia, I think, when you eat them. And then there is this Skinny Taste Simple book that this is actually one of my cookbooks that I got a while back, because anytime you can use fewer ingredients, that's most likely going to save you money compared to really complicated recipes. And then another book that I checked out is this Mostly Meatless cookbook from America's Test Kitchen. And reducing meat intake is a great way to save money off your grocery bill. And unfortunately, I do struggle with this a little bit because a lot of the recipes, when they reduce meat, what they'll do is they'll substitute lentils. And unfortunately, my son, my oldest son, Gugu, has a lentil allergy. He has a peanut and a lentil allergy. So we can't use lentils, and that cuts out a lot of really good, cheap, budget-friendly recipes. But what I will do instead is often I will double the recipe, but instead of using double meat, I'll use vegetables instead to double that recipe. And that cuts down on the food expenses while also giving us leftovers so that I can save time and energy cooking again and again and again. Another small and kind of funny thing that I did is I switched our comforter over from a winter comforter to a summer weight comforter. But instead of buying a storage bag for that comforter, I just put it inside 2 white garbage bags instead. And that saved 15 bucks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but hey, every little bit counts. Here at H is in Life, we're all about using what you have and being okay with non-aesthetic storage options. And another thing that I'm doing is I'm also continuing to add the money that I save by not impulse spending during this low buy challenge into my high yield savings account that I started at the beginning of this challenge. And so far, the money that I've deposited into that account has earned me over $35 in passive income. And considering the experts are now recommending that you increase the amount of money that you have in your emergency fund from around 3 to 6 months to up to 6 to 12 months, that's not a bad idea to have that money in a high yield savings account, because they allow you to have quick access to your money if and when you need it, while also allowing you to earn passive income on that money while it sits there. So I will make sure to link the HYSA that I'm using down in the description box below in case you also want to look into this smart money hack. Man, it was so rainy and dark earlier, and now the sun is out and blinging in my face. We might need to move inside because I don't know if I can handle this. I was sitting here and I saw this super fat, chunky robin staring at me. Oh, I think this can work. Hopefully this works. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to go through this journal with you, and I want to share all of the things that I didn't impulse spend money on in April. And just in case you haven't seen my previous videos, basically this is a journal that I have been using since the beginning of the year to track all of the times I had the impulse to spend money and buy something that wasn't planned or that I would deem non-essential. And the things that I've been tracking in this journal include the date and the location of the impulse spend, the item that I was thinking of buying, as well as how much it cost, and then also any particular notes that I had about that item that I wanted to kind of point out or remind myself when I was talking to you as to why I decided not to buy that thing. And again, to all of the haters who tell me that I'm not saving money every time I choose not to impulse buy something, please remember this is the same concept as creating a savings jar to stop a bad habit and putting money in every time you do something like curse or smoke a cigarette or bite your nails or whatever. Let's get a little bit more cozy here, shall we? Let's just lean back a little. Okay. So on April 1st, I was at Home Goods and I did find some ribbed glasses that I sort of liked. However, I didn't like the color. They were sort of charcoal and I was really looking for clear. So I decided not to buy those and I saved myself $9.99 on that. And then while I was there, I also spotted this fake plant. And this has been a continued conversation between myself and my husband because I injured my back last month, which I talked about in last month's video. I injured my back moving a large plant that we have around our home in a large pot. And so we've been having this conversation as to whether we want to put a fake plant or a real plant back in that corner. My husband is team real plant. I am team fake plant. I would love to hear your thoughts on what kind of plant that we could put in that corner because I am a black thumb. I'm not good with taking care of plants, so I need something low maintenance that can survive very cold, very dry Chicago winters that's 7 feet tall or so for that back corner. If you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them. But I messaged my husband about this plant. He didn't like it and we were just two on the fence. So I didn't end up getting that plant and I saved $179.99 on that. And then on April 2nd, I was at Target to get a birthday gift and some socks for myself. And of course, I had to pass the women's clothing section and I saw this really cute white and blue maxi dress that caught my eye. And then another thing that caught my eye were these light blue jeans that were adjustable at the top, which I love it when they have those on my kids' pants because my kids are super skinny and we always have to adjust their pants to pull it in. And as someone whose weight tends to fluctuate, I just think that's so smart for them to put adjustable tops at the top of the jeans. But they were a little bit too light for my taste and also not my size. So I didn't end up getting those. And the white and blue maxi dress, I didn't end up getting either because not having straps at my age, I think I'm just not as comfortable with that. So I didn't get those things and they were $30 and $32. And then I also passed up another fake plant that I found in the home decor section. I think it was a hearth and hand magnolia kind of item. I passed that up and I saved $150 not buying that. And then after that, I went a good long stretch without having any other impulse buying temptations until April 26th when we got a Crate and Barrel magazine in our mailbox. And of course, if it comes there, I have to look at it. I just have to. I don't really have to, but I do. I might be a masochist. But anyway, what I saw in there were some bronze metal planters. I thought that was so cute. But then when I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't really know where I would put that. And I think first of all, before I buy any new plants or planters, I need to learn to take care of the plants in the garden that I already have. So I said no to that and saved myself $299. Okay, and then on April 29th, I was at Home Goods again because I had put on my shopping list that I wanted to get a tray for our dining room table because we use these circular like charger mats to put our plates on, and I'm sick and tired of them just sliding around on the table, and I would love to have something to hold them and keep them together. And then whenever I have flowers in a vase, I can also put it on top of that. And unfortunately, I didn't find one there, so I had to look elsewhere. But what I did see while I was there was a Tommy Bahama rope lamp, which I was thinking that I've been wanting to get a lamp for this little alcove that we have in our living room. And when I stopped and thought about it, I didn't think that this rope lamp was the right vibe. It's more like nautical vibes, and I'm going for more like Japanese paper lantern vibes. So I didn't get that rope lantern and I saved $79.99 on that. And then on April 30th, I was running to Target for some rain ponchos for my kids. And this is something that I had been kind of waiting until the last minute to spend money on because both of my kids have field trips coming up, which I'll talk about when we talk about this month's spending. But I was kind of trying to wait on this because I was hoping that it wouldn't rain, and it has obviously been raining a ton. So I had to go and grab those rain ponchos. But then while I was there looking for the rain ponchos, of course, something caught my eye and I saw this gorgeous KitchenAid stand mixer that was kind of like a white copper color. It was so cute, and it was on sale for $100 off because, like I said, I have been reading more cookbooks, and a lot of the cookbooks that I've been looking at have these amazing baking recipes, but a lot of them call for stand mixers, which is something that I've never owned and have no experience with. So because I have no experience with this, I actually even wrote myself a note here that says, please get followers' advice, because you guys already de-influenced me from getting the Ninja Creamy that I mentioned in last month's video, where I said I was thinking about that, and I got so many helpful messages from you guys saying that it wasn't worth it, so I have crossed that off of my list. But I'd love to know your opinions on these kinds of stand mixers and if they're worth it. So please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I really super appreciate it. And let me know what color you like if you like those, because they come in so many different colors. I always think that it's really good to get other people's opinions on topics like this because, for example, I know that when I saw that they had a green one come out with a wood bowl, when people were talking about that item, they were saying that the wood bowl is not going to be good for people who actually want it to function because I guess dough would be sticking to it. So please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I so appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And that means that in April, I saved $1,130.96, not impulse buying this stuff that I mentioned in my journal. So like I said, I'm going to be depositing the money that I saved by not impulse spending on the things in this journal into my high yield savings account and letting that grow into the end of the year. So what I want to do now is go through this month's total spending with you. And in previous videos, I called this topic non-essential spending, but I think that's the wrong word for it because all of the spending that I've been doing has been really well planned and intentional for the most part. So as I did in the previous month's video, I've divided all of our spending into categories, and in order of most expensive to least expensive, the spending categories that we had included: number 1, clothing and shoes; number 2, home and garden related spending; number 3, spending related to family and experiences; number 4, restaurants and eating out; and number 5, health and wellness. So kicking off the spending related to clothing and shoes, the one thing that I purchased in this category this month was white socks for myself, which was a total of $10.49, and I bought on sale to save $3. And this was an exception that I set for myself at the beginning of this low buy year, which is that I would be able to spend if I needed to replace something that was broken or that got used up or worn out. And so because a lot of my socks had gotten holes in them, I needed to replace them with some new socks. And I ended up going with a 5-pack of simple white ankle socks. And the idea behind this is that when one sock out of that pack wears out, even if I have to get rid of that sock, I can still pair the sock that was originally from that match with another sock from another pair. And then, should other pieces wear out, then I can get rid of the worn out ones and match these socks because they're all the same color. So like I said, this was the lowest expense category, and I spent a total of $10.49. That brings us to spending related to our home and garden. And as I mentioned previously, I purchased a DVD player at the beginning of this month, which was a total after tax of $43.47. And then I also had to purchase some shoe covers and a table tray to hold those chargers that I talked about on the table. And the shoe covers are for maintenance men who come into our homes. And this is something that we had been meaning to purchase for a while, because anytime we have someone come to, say, check the air conditioning, or water guy coming to turn on and test our sprinklers and backflow coming up here towards the end of the month, which is something that the city requires. But this is just going to be more convenient so that they can still come into our house, but just put these on top of their shoes and boots when they come in, so we can keep our floors clean and they still get to wear their shoes. Oh, and another thing that I forgot to mention about the table tray is that when I was selecting that table tray, I wanted to have something with handles that could be not only used to corral those chargers, but that could also function as a tray. As a minimalist, I love buying multi-purpose items like this that can serve multiple functions in my home. So between the shoe covers and the table tray, I spent $57.18. And then the next purchase that I made in the home and garden category was a set of 3 textile landscape wall arts that I found when I was at Home Goods. And this is something that I've kind of had in the back of my mind since we moved into our home last year. And initially, when I was trying to plan the interior decor of our home, I had this vision board with the table that I wanted, the chairs that I wanted, some sideboards and plants and whatnot. And in that kind of mood board, I had this set of 3 pieces of wall art that featured kind of a landscape sunset on the wall. And when I saw this at Home Goods, I was just instantly in love. And even though it was more expensive than the ones that I had initially found on Amazon, I like it so much more. And in this case, I don't mind paying a little bit more because I know I'm getting something that felt really special to me and felt more high quality than something I would probably get on Amazon. So each individual wall art was $29.99, which after tax ended up being $95.59. So all in all, that brings us to a category total for home and garden of $196.30. Next up, that brings us to the category of spending related to family and experiences. And this is another one of those things that I set exceptions around at the beginning of our low-buy year because I don't want to skimp on this expense category in particular. I want my kids and our family to be able to have fun experiences together, to be able to go to their friends' birthday parties and give them nice gifts, to be able to travel and do things together. So this is not an area that I'm trying to strictly budget for per se. So the expenses that we had related to this category this month, first of all, Dee Dee had a school field trip that was $13. And then I also had to prepay for another field trip that's going to happen later this month. That's going to be an overnight camping experience, and I paid $126.75 for that. And then besides Dee Dee, Gugu also had a school field trip that was $70 this month. I guess the schools are kind of doing this fun end of year field trip spending. So that's something that we've been talking about a lot and they're really looking forward to. And then besides all of the spending that we did on field trips, Gugu also had a friend who had a birthday party at the beginning of the month, and he was dead set on getting this friend a plasma ball. He said that was the one thing that he wanted to get this friend. So I went looking for plasma balls. I found one at Target that was originally $27.99, but I got it on sale. It was the last one, so thank goodness. I got it on sale for $18.01. And then at the end of the month, I had to run to Target to grab those rain ponchos that I mentioned earlier, and they were $2.49 each for an after-tax total of $5.42. So all in all, in April, we spent a total of $233.18 on family and experiential purchases. The fourth expense category is related to restaurants and dining out. And I know that a lot of people comment on my videos that they think that eating out is a waste of money and they would never go out to eat as often as we do. But for us, going out to eat is something that's worth it and we enjoy spending money on. And that is another exception that I set at the beginning of this low-buy year, which is that we are able to eat out once per week. And not only are we able to eat out once per week, but I also use a technique called rollover budgeting, which I talked about in the previous video. So make sure that you go check out that if you want to know more about rollover budgeting and how I allocate funds for eating out. So we did stick to the rule that we set that we would be able to eat out once per week. And typically that spending tends to occur on weekends, usually a Friday, a Saturday, or a Sunday. So the first weekend we spent $26.16 at Potbelly's, and that felt low because it was only my husband and myself eating that week because Gugu was at a birthday party, Dee Dee was at a play date. So that was just for the two of us to get sandwiches at Potbelly's, no chips, no drinks, nothing else. And it was $26.16. But again, like I said, we plan for this, we save for this, and we enjoy spending money on this. So to me, hashtag worth it. But so like I said, $26.16 on that. And then the second week, we got Shake Shack, which was $49.73. And it was a little bit less expensive than usual because Didi decided that instead of a double meat burger, he wanted to get a single meat burger. And then something that we always do when we get burgers is we just drink things at home. We get it for takeout and bring it home ourselves. And we share 2 fries. So instead of getting 4 fries, 1 for everyone, we just get 2 fries to share. And then the third week was our most expensive dining out experience because we went to a Korean restaurant. That is the second time that we went to this restaurant, and it was so good. And we ended up spending a total of $179.25 for that, which also included the tip. And we typically don't leave tips if we're just going to something like Chipotle or Shake Shack, or we're picking things up ourselves. But if it's a sit-down restaurant, we will leave a tip. And one thing that we had also done at that restaurant, and I've talked about previously, is that when we're going to a sit-down restaurant, sometimes what we'll do is we'll order enough so that we have leftovers for the next day, and then we're kind of getting more bang for our buck with that eating out experience. So we got a thing of bulgogi that we didn't even touch, and we took home for lunch the next day. So if you think about, we spent around, let's just say $180 for 4 people to eat a total of 2 meals, 1 dinner, 1 lunch. You could say that $180 divided by 8 meals is basically an average of $22.50. And then the fourth week, we got Shake Shack again. Can you tell we love Shake Shack? And we spent a total of $52.98 because this time Didi decided that he again wanted to get a double meat burger, and we again got 2 French fries to share, no drinks. So all in all, the category total for restaurants and eating out was $308.12. And finally, that brings us to our most expensive spending category, which was spending related to health and wellness. So at the beginning of the month, I had to buy a hot and cold pack for my back because, like I said, I injured my back the previous month. And after I saw a doctor, he advised me that I should get one of those to help with some residual back pain and leg pain that I had after that injury. And I'm happy to say that I'm doing much better after following his advice. And that cost me $16.19. And then we also had a copay for a doctor visit, but that was $60 for that. But the really high expense that we had this month was when we went for Didi's annual eye exam, and we found out that his eyes got a whole diopter worse in 1 year, and we had to replace not only his glasses, but then we also decided to invest in MySight contacts for him. And if you're not familiar with MySight contacts, I mentioned this in one of my previous videos because this is something that we got for his big brother. And basically what it is it's contacts for young kids that's supposed to slow down the progression of myopia, nearsightedness. And I have absolutely terrible eyesight. I'm a -9 and a -8. So this is something that I really don't want my kids to have to end up having bad eyesight like me. So between the exam and the glasses and the contacts, we ended up having to spend $769.59 on all of those things. So that brings the total health and wellness spending to $845.78. But even though this was our most expensive category, I just want to say how grateful I am to be able to go to the doctor for these things and not have to go into debt over it. Because there was a period of several years where my dad was dying of liver cirrhosis and then eventually passed away, that I was living on my own, working multiple minimum wage jobs to survive, where I wasn't able to afford health insurance, and it was horrible. There was even one time where I went indoor rock climbing with my friends, and I fell and twisted my ankle and heard this awful popping sound. But I knew that I couldn't afford to go to the emergency room, so I just spent weeks hopping around on one foot or crawling around the house on my hands and knees until the mysterious problem eventually resolved itself. And I actually talked about that experience in this video that I'll link up here and down in the description box below for you in case you're interested in checking that out. But needless to say, I never ever want my kids to have to go through something like that. So that's why I just feel so grateful that I am able to spend in this category. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to go over the list of no-buy rules and exceptions that I set for my own low-buy year, as well as share some tips on what you can do to better set your own rules and exceptions that will help you stay laser focused on your goals and priorities in the months ahead. So at the beginning of the year, one of the things I did was sit down and write out a list of rules and things that I wasn't going to buy this year, as well as setting some exceptions for the things that we are allowed to spend money on. So here's a peek at the free Notion template that I have been using to prepare, plan, and track my results during this low buy challenge so far. And like I said, this is a completely free Notion template. It's a completely free account. I don't pay for that. And I used one of their standard templates and modified it to suit my needs and goals. And what I love about this is not only that it's free, but also that not only can I look at it on my computer, but I can also pull it up on the Notion app on my phone so that when I'm on the go and I just need to refresh myself on my rules, exceptions, and no-buy list, I can do that. So sometimes I do find it helpful to go back to my 2025 no-buy list and kind of review the things that I promised myself that I wasn't going to buy. Like, for example, the rule of 5 for clothing, saying that I was only allowed to buy 5 items of clothing this year. I'm not going to count socks towards that because socks, like I said, are one of those things that got worn out and needed to be replaced. And I don't think that people typically count socks for this rule of 5 rule. And doing regular check-ins on my rules, exceptions, and no-buy list help me make sure that I stay very intentional and aligned with my spending this year. So I've been really good with sticking to only spending on necessities, replacing things that wear out, break, or need to be replaced, eating out once per week, and spending on medical and health-related expenses, and that it's okay to spend on things like birthday parties and gifts with friends. And also for there's a bug here. And also for some pre-planned projects that I knew I was going to have to tackle in this home that I wasn't able to finish last year. And another thing I wanted to mention here was that it can be really helpful to read books or listen to audiobooks or find YouTube channels that help you stay inspired and committed towards your no-buy or low-buy goals. And an audiobook that I'm revisiting right now is called Your Money or Your Life, but this is kind of one of the origins of FIRE movement, and it really talks about a lot of these themes that are relevant to no-buys and low-buys, like being intentional with your spending and debt and paying off debt and how to calculate if something is worth spending money on based on your time and your values and priorities. So that's an audiobook I definitely recommend, and you can check it out. I'll link it down below, or you can check it out from your local library, whatever. But just find some of these sources of inspiration that can help you stay inspired and motivated during your challenge. And another thing that I've been finding really helpful during my low-buy year is creating a low-buy wish list on my phone to kind of keep track of the things that pop into my head that I might want to spend money on. And I've divided these things up into categories such as family experiences, like we got the DVD player that I mentioned earlier. We're inviting my great aunt and uncle to come visit us, and we're gonna take care of them really nicely while they're here. We were planning a trip to Portugal. We've switched that to Florida for several reasons, which I don't have time to talk about right now. And then also you can see that I have listed that we want to do some projects and home decor stuff. So I've listed out 4 currently. I said that I could do up to 5, but we'll see how that goes. And then some things that I wanted to purchase related to food and cooking, like I've been thinking about getting some muffin pans, a cast iron pan to replace our non-stick pan after I found out how bad non-stick coated pans are for us. stand mixer with a paddle attachment that I mentioned earlier, the Ninja Creamy, which you guys already helped me cross off the list, and an outdoor barbecue grill, which I think we're going to be buying next month. So having that on my phone has been really, really helpful. And if you want to do this yourself, you can even start writing down the dates of the things as you think of them. And then if you're setting rules around how long you want to give yourself before you make a purchase, such as if you want to wait 72 hours, or you want to wait 7 days, or you want to go with the classic 30-day rule of minimalism, so that you know exactly when you thought of that item and you can track how long it's been. And then at the end of that time, you can decide, is this something that I actually want to buy? And if you're looking for more financial rules and tips to help you spend less and save more, be sure and go check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks that you'll like, or I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.